over 12 hours since Bitcoin has last set a new all-time high, it is clear that the Bitcoin bull market is officially over. Just kidding, but why has Bitcoin initiated this absolutely massive 1% dump? The answer might shock you. So if you're new here, hit that like and subscribe. It gets it up to Femex below if you want to buy Bitcoin or altcoins in this absolutely bananas period of the crypto market. And without any further ado, let's absolutely take a look at what has just transpired in the last 12 hours. Well, as you can see, it's very clear now that the bulls are in trouble. After the last week, Bitcoin has pumped over 30%. Now from the all-time highs to where we are right now, we're down roughly 2%. It has quite literally never been more over. Just kidding, but let's actually talk about what is happening right now, because there actually is some big news coming up in just the next, honestly, just hours from now. So one of the things I want to look at is that we have the CPI coming out tomorrow, and that obviously right now is some uncertainty. CPI is not nearly as important as it was over the last year and a half or 2 years. I mean, remember basically during most of 2023, the main thing that people would get excited about when it comes to Bitcoin price is the release of the CPI, because pretty much it was trying to figure out or calculate when we might start getting rate cuts. But guys, as I'm sure you already know, months ago, we already started getting these rate cuts. And in fact, it's not even a giant factor anymore. However, it is something that is definitely, I think, worth considering. We don't get these CPI reports very often. So it's definitely something that the market's looking at. But I personally think that really all the biggest news that it has come out in regards to Bitcoin is already in the past. Like, for example, the U.S. election was by far the biggest single fundamental piece of news that I think is going to have a massive long-term impact on Bitcoin. Well, I guess there's three things: the Bitcoin spot ETF approvals, the US elections, and the Bitcoin halving. Those are the three biggest fundamental things that have happened to Bitcoin. And actually, they've all happened in 2024. The Bitcoin spot ETFs were in January of 2024. The US elections were just about a week ago. And the Bitcoin halving was just a few months ago. Quite literally, all of the biggest fundamental things that drive the Bitcoin price, or that will drive the Bitcoin price, have already happened. So yes, CPI is the next thing that's coming. But if this is all of the previous things in terms of importance, you have to get a magnifying glass to really take a look at how important CPI is. It's just very insignificant compared to the trifecta: Bitcoin spot ETFs, Bitcoin halving, and US elections. But also, I actually want to look at this chart. I mean, it's very clear Bitcoin is actually on the verge of a complete breakdown. Okay, now I want you to take a moment. Okay, we like to do this trick at least once a week or every few weeks. Take a moment and zoom in here. Oh, that's right. Actually, this is an inverted chart. And no, Bitcoin's not on the verge of having a giant breakdown. It's on the verge of having a giant pumpy. That's right. Yes, a massive pumpy to the upside is what we're actually on the verge of. But it's a nice little psychological thing. I personally like doing it at least once every few weeks. Very clearly Bitcoin is on the verge of a massive bull market. All dips, in my opinion, are for buying. I think especially after the most recent pump and basically the vindication or validation of this bullish thesis, the bullish busty, I think it's very clear now that, most likely we're going to continue to see massive upside. This is the beginning of the bull market. I mean, there's a million different charts. In fact, all charts, if you zoom out, and all fundamental data is showing us that this bull market seems to be on track to be repeating, just like we've seen over and over and over again. In fact, I've seen a lot of data actually showing that this upcoming bull market might even be a little more similar to 2016 than to 2020. What do I mean by that? Well, 2016 was quite a little bit more pumpy in terms of percentage gains, and that's kind of crazy. For example, one of the tweets that I'm referencing is TechDev comparing 2020's cycle with 2016, and it looks like that this cycle is more similar to 2016, meaning, so if we zoom out, you can see how low this indicator Fisher was back in previous bull markets, whereas back in 2020 it wasn't, we didn't have a lot of momentum swinging into this massive pump, whereas now look at this, it's actually off of my screen with how low it is, meaning a lot of potential momentum left on the table. Same thing with this, the TechDev showed. this SAR indicator that he's looking at, the big red, I like to call it, because it's a big piece of red on my screen, and that's pretty much the extent of my understanding of this. But anyway, look at this. I mean, it's in the red here for a couple years, specifically in the 2016 pop out of it. We didn't even go into it back in 2018, 19, leading into the 2020 bull market, but we definitely have this time. I mean, for example, actually one of the biggest pieces of data when it comes to Bitcoin being so oversold was this on the weekly chart. If we actually look at this 200-day moving average, let me actually just beef it up a little bit so it's easier to see. We look at the 200-day moving average. We had not gone below it in the previous, or we had not gotten a bearish cross in the previous bear to bull. This time we very clearly did. The 21 and 50 week moving average is completely plummeted below the 200 week. So again, just indicating that this last bear market was actually extremely dumpy and gives us a lot of momentum moving forward. Another thing he mentions to kind of cite this is the CMF indicator. Same thing. We see how much it dipped below back in 2016 leading into the 2017 bull market, where it didn't really go that low in the one prior to that, and it did here. And actually, TechDev also points out, in terms of measuring euphoria, there's a better way to measure it other than just saying like, oh, I feel like it's euphoric or I feel like it's not euphoric. This is the NUPL indicator, and basically it's a heat map of showing kind of where the actually, let me zoom out here, of where the sentiment kind of lies. And we're just barely in the belief stage, according to this indicator. You can see where my mouse is right here. So back in the previous 2016, 2017 market, Bitcoin price was around about $1,000. And then it went all the way up to almost 20,000. And then when we were here the last time, back in the other previous bull market, Bitcoin was still, tens of thousands of dollars away from its all-time highs. So just another piece of data to show that, hey, very likely we're not near all-time highs whatsoever. And finally, I want to mention that the publicly traded AI firm Genius Group adopts Bitcoin as a primary treasury asset, planning to acquire about $120 million of Bitcoin just for their adoption. Every one of these pieces of news that comes out every day on its own is not very significant. But when you add all this up over time, that's how we're going to get to $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 per Bitcoin and higher over the next, who knows how long it's going to take. With Bitcoin's recent, 1% massive crash, Bitcoin dominance is increasing. Why? Well, that's because altcoins got completely diddled. Another thing I want to highlight too is just the Bitcoin CME Gap. This is something that very often does fill. It doesn't have to. There's instances in the past where it doesn't. But you can see, these gaps, like for example here, back in 2023, there's a gap here at about 40,000. We pumped all the way up to about 50,000, but we came right back down to fill this gap, and then we continued up. And there, I just highlighted a couple other instances over the past year. We saw it back here in July, and we saw it here in August. And now there is a decently sized gap because of this last mega pump that we received a few days ago. Will Bitcoin price over the next couple of days or couple of weeks trend down to about 78,000 before continuing up? Hey, it's possible. Maybe we'll have a pump and actually continue up to 100. Maybe we'll get a rejection at 100, come back down to 78, and then continue the bull market, right? These are all distinct possibilities that you absolutely cannot write off. They're not bad. They're not bearish. They're objectively just part of a normal market movement. But it's just important to highlight that, there is a possibility. Maybe we still, even though I'm extremely bullish, there's still going to be dumps, okay? And all I'm saying is that every single dump that we get is just a prime time opportunity. Specifically, this is like the main thing that's sticking in my brain. We have all this time where likely Bitcoin is going to float to the upside alongside altcoins, about 300 days. And every dip, especially every massive dip in the next 300 days, me personally, I'm going to be buying as much as I can with what little money I have not invested, because most of it's invested. But also, maybe opening leverage positions, maybe getting a little crazy with a tiny percent of my portfolio, maybe just being a little nuts or something, right? Trying to maybe get a 50x on some trades or some garbage coins or something like that to then put into Bitcoin. But other than that, altcoins are still, they still look fine in terms of, this is the entire altcoin chart. The breakout is still alive. As I'm looking at this, it's kind of crazy. Obviously I was being sarcastic. It's not really that big of a dump. A true dump, honestly, for Bitcoin would be to something maybe even like this, which, what's kind of crazy? It would literally just set us back like 2 days, okay? It would just erase the gains of 2 days because of how much we've pumped. So keep in mind, Bitcoin can pump massively, but also don't be scared if it dumps, especially then, because very often in this environment, what we're likely to see is just it to go right back up. So there's going to be volatility. That has always been the case for these bull markets. There's always volatility. But with that being said, yeah, I mean, basically this is not a scary situation, totally normal. And in fact, this market looks really good. It looks insane. The stock market's actually down a little bit today as well, and I think it's partially because of CPI and news about that, basically the uncertainty about it. But overall, this is a very extremely bullish environment for Bitcoin, big time. And get signed up to Femex below if you want to buy Bitcoin or altcoins or trade, and receive an $8,000 deposit bonus if you sign up with my link. Without any further ado,